Speaking of,
Mhm.
big projects, you went from Star Fox. Did you go straight to Cameo? Is there a little
Uh,
little gap in there? I'm trying to think.
Not quite. Not quite. So there was a Banjo racing game in between uh, that I did some work on,
You just threw a
and
curveball. You just blew my mind. I'm like, oh man.
yeah.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Jiggylookback, bringing you something a little bit different today. I actually had the opportunity to interview Michael Cawood, who was a former Rare animator. He started at Rare in 1999 on a little project called Dinosaur Planet. He was there when it transitioned to Starfox Adventures, and he was there when they transitioned from Nintendo to Microsoft. So be sure to stick around because he shares some exclusive details. I hope you'll drop a like in this video to help spread my content, do the hype thing, whatever that is, and subscribe so you don't miss a future upload. Here's the interview. Enjoy.
I went to university to study animation. I was a 2D animation graduate at that point. And funnily enough, I went up to I did a couple of job interviews, and the craziest one was the job interview with Rare. They're in the middle of Nowheresville, and I could not find them. And this was back in the day when you didn't have GPS and everything else helping you out. So I was just racing around the countryside, going through muddy ditches and stuff like that, trying to find this random country house in the middle of Nowheresville. And I got there and at least an hour late. Um, and they put me in their waiting room, and I thought, that's it, screwed this one up. There's no way I'm getting this. Um, but they gathered their people together again and had the meeting, and Kevin Bayliss was in that meeting. I think Johnny Christensen was in it as well, and I'm trying to remember who the other one was, but it went great because one of the funny things about being late like that is that you're just apologetic and your heart's pumping, and so it was just I had a lot of energy.
Sure.
And so I was able to talk to them with like lots of energy, which probably made up for them me being an hour late. And I got the job, which was kind of amazing. Straight out of college, that was better than most of my other graduate friends starting in a position like that. I didn't know what I was going to be doing at the time. I just kind of assumed I'd be doing Donkey Kong cycles or something like that. But you know, if I they said when can you start, and I said can I finish my degree first, and so they let me finish my degree, made me an offer for a start date, and I went up there, and Lee Shinneman sort of showed me around a bit. We went into the mocap suite area where they showed me a video alongside my friend Phil Woods. He was starting on the day that day as well, and he was a programmer. Funnily enough, I worked with him on my latest project, which we'll get
Oh,
into
awesome.
later. And we were shown a trailer for what was Dinosaur Planet at the time, and it was just like, oh my god, Rare's making their own Zelda style game. And then he just turned around to me specifically and said, and you're just going to do all the cinematics. That's your job for the next few years. And it was just like, you
Yeah.
know, it was like a dream come true, opening job kind of thing. So I was pretty happy with that. Um, so yeah, I spent a few years doing that. I mean, I can go into the depths of that one. I'm sure that's what your fan
Oh,
base is
we'll get
most
into
interested.
it.
Yeah, but I mean, I basically spent a 7.5 years working for Rare, and then I sort of took a sabbatical, went off and worked on some other things. I worked on the movie Happy Feet for a bit down in Australia. Came back to Rare for a little bit. Then I went up to Scotland, worked on an animated feature up there for a little bit. Did some other commercials in a few places. Basically, at this point, my career becomes this amorphous thing that just keeps shifting and changing, and I'm moving from one city to another. which was a lot of fun. Got a lot of different experiences, learned, like, expanded my universe an awful lot more than what I'd been doing only at Rare. And did the Narnia movies at one point, loads of commercials. Eventually, I actually got the opportunity to move to America. So I went and worked for a games company over there, a startup. They were the ex Metroid Prime guys, which, funnily enough, I had a bit of
Oh,
history with because when Star Fox was coming out, no one knew anything about Metroid Prime. It was the underdog, whereas everyone was hyping Starfox Adventures because it was Star Fox.
of course.
And then when the two games came out side by side, it all of a sudden everyone's expectations were so high for Star Fox Adventures that there was disappointment there. And simultaneously, Metroid Prime, no one had really gotten much information about it, and all of a sudden that became the big thing. So it was interesting to me that I ended up working with the same guys. They were starting a new company in Austin, Texas, and I was with them for a couple of years doing prototypes before I moved on and did a whole lot of stuff. Well, actually, the next thing I did was Skylanders over in New York. I did Skylanders Giants, and I was the animation director on a bunch of stuff there. Funnily enough, I just did a job where I got to meet a lot of my old colleagues from that, which was
Oh,
amazing,
really?
catching up with everyone. Yeah. And then moved over to LA, and I've actually been in LA ever since. And I did a lot of movies, a lot of pre-visualization for, so that's kind of like shot creation. So funnily enough, the same kind of work I was doing back at Rare, just in movies. And like, oh, I mean, the list of movies at that point becomes a bit stupid. I mean, it feels a bit stupid because I'd spent so many years doing long projects. Like Star Fox Adventures was 3.5 years of my life, and then Kameo was three years of my life, and then I went over to Hollywood, and you just spend a few months on each one. So I started rattling through more and more credits faster and faster, and I even ended up working on for Encore, a visual effects company, where every single week I was churning out another episode of a show, and it was like The Flash,
Yeah,
Supergirl, all
I
kinds
knew
of
that's
stuff.
where that was going. It was like when you said that, like every week, I'm like, they were known for just their high output of
Yes.
special effects and VFX and things. I actually am a huge CW Arrowverse fan.
All right.
So
Okay.
yeah, I loved Arrow, and I watched all of Flash, and I watched some of Supergirl. I didn't watch it all, but I watched DC Legends, like all of those. I was very into that universe. I just loved it. It was just one of my like go to, like, come home watch it after work. I was like, I love this, especially when it was on
Yeah, and
Netflix.
in terms of like racking up credits, that was the fastest because my IMDb was growing so fast at that point because you just do one shot on one episode, and all of a
The
sudden it's like,
bragging
okay, I
rights.
was on that episode. So it felt like a bit of a con, but it was also a nice balance to the stuff where I'd worked for years on something and then you only get one credit for it.
Right.
So I was in that process of sort of like building up credits, trying to expand the kinds of things that I would work on. And then, along the way, after that, in fact, that's when the pandemic kicked in, and I was developing animation projects with my wife. She's a writer and a producer,
Hmm.
and we started pitching all over Hollywood, and we spoke to an incredible number of companies. But at the end of the day, I just wanted to get my hands dirty to make something again. And funnily enough, we were just sort of seeing that what we probably wanted to do at that point was make something for ourselves where nobody else could get in the way to stop us from making it. And that's where started to make sense to make a game because you could self-publish your own game these days. But also, we happened to pick up a Quest 2 at the time, and I fell in love with VR, and I saw it as a growing, expanding area. And so we just started developing this idea based on an IP that we'd already developed as a screenplay before, and there was a gameplay mechanic that felt like it could really work. And so we mashed the two together and started building this thing. And so I've just come out of the last 4 years working on the Pheonix Gene, which is a VR action game. And so now we're just in that sort of marketing mode and spreading the
Sure.
word and getting people to know about it. But yeah, that's the long and short of it. Along the way, there's been lots of other little diversions and small things I was doing here and there.
A couple
But
Nintendo commercials I saw. That was pretty cool.
yes, yeah, I mean, all kinds of little things pop up. Funnily enough, that's one of those things that when you've already worked on some big IP or something like that. You then move to another town. You're just trying to get some commercial job to get you pay the bills or something.
Right.
And it's not unsurprising when they hire you because you've already worked on that thing. You can sort of say, "Oh yeah, I worked on a Call of Duty project, so I can do a Call of Duty commercial, or this sort of thing." And yes, I did a Mario commercial at one point, and a few others dotted along the way. But those aren't really like making a game. It looks like it in your
Right.
portfolio, but they're really just like you're making a piece of animation at that point.
Right. The process for a game is much more in depth. And actually, that was something I
Yes.
wanted to ask you, like your experience versus a show versus a movie versus a game. Because even with a full fledged movie, something like Happy Feet, for example, because it's the one that I saw pop up the most. Um, the the process, the animation process, it feels like for a game, there's just so many little details and different things. Like you almost have to do not only the animations for something to happen, but for something to not happen, for interactions with something or no interactions with something. It's what would you how would you gauge the depth of, like, on a scale of 10 being like this is very difficult, to like 1 being like, oh yeah, easy, I could crank that out, no problem, like versus a game, a movie, TV show. How would
Well,
you
there's
gauge
lots of
those?
differences in there. I mean, for starters, in movies, you can cheat what you see on the screen all the time, although that's becoming a little trickier now that sometimes you're doing things in stereoscopic 3D. But mostly you can cheat to camera, whereas gameplay animations, you can't really cheat to camera. They have to work.
True.
It's one of the things I actually love about VR is that you're going to if you are watching a scene play out in front of you, you can kind of move your head around stuff so they can't cheat.
Yes.
And I'm doing a lot of mods at the moment where I'm actually doing VR mods of existing games and seeing just how many times they cheated because they thought they were getting away with it, and it's not, and they're not getting away with it. But then the other thing is in games you can get away with a certain amount of interpenetration between one thing and another thing
Sure.
that you just cannot get away with in movies and things like that. I do remember when I very first started at Rare, it was one of my concerns. I was like, how much am I allowed to make something penetrate something else? Do I have to spend a lot of time noodling this to get it exactly right so that you don't see any penetration? Or is it okay? And the truth was, it was okay because this was Nintendo 64 era and everything looked
Yes.
pretty basic. There was no
Yeah.
stopping one giant
You lean
polygon
against a rock
to
and the
another
hand's like
polygon.
floating out here. You're like, yeah, it's fine. Nobody
It,
cares. We
it
love
is
it.
shocking. I've been obviously lately I've been looking through YouTube and I've seen all the videos that have been popping up for Dinosaur Planet, and it's insane to look at how low poly that was. But everything's scarred into my retina. I remember every single one of those shots and all of those little moments, and it's really weird. I'm really familiar with them, like it's a character I
Yeah.
grew up with, but at the same time, super crude. And it very quickly I couldn't really use it in my portfolio because people's expectations of what they were seeing wanted to see in your portfolio surpassed that very quickly. So, funnily enough, Star Fox did not sit in my portfolio for that long, or my reel. I had to replace it with other stuff because they thought, that things moved along faster. But
Mm.
yeah, we used to get away with an awful lot, and yeah, it's insane.
Oh man, that's gonna segue right into Star Fox. Let's just talk about Star Fox. So it
Okay, yeah, yeah.
it is one of my favorite GameCube games, actually. I love it.
Then I can only say that that's got to be from nostalgia's sake. Yeah, surely. 'Cause
I mean,
I,
I've replayed it so much. I think it has a little bit to do with the lore. I think it has a little bit to do with just the worlds and everything. Just I love the dinosaur aspect of it, the creative like mystique, the ambiance, everything. The music's amazing. I actually think graphically it holds up super well.
yeah, I would agree. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. I mean,
The fur
there
effects,
was
that's like
there
one
was
I always go back to.
I know I was good friends with the programmer who was coming up with that stuff, and we used the fur effects on the floor as well to create grass. And he did
Interesting. That
all
makes
kinds
sense.
of really cool stuff while he was working for Rare. I mean, he went on to work for Pixar and ILM and all those guys because he was that talented. But yeah, there was a lot of firsts that happened in that game. The only problem was it took us so long to get it out that some firsts had passed by. Other people had got them to market
Mm,
before we did. like as far as we were aware, we were doing like some of the earliest voices and lip sync. But I mean, that was old news by the time it came out. And then there was like, we might have been some of the first ones to come out with something that looked like fur. Um, that was kind of just catching that wave. But yeah, there was a lot of firsts in there. There was real time shadows as well, sort of real time shadows.
Good day night
Lots of stuff.
cycle. I mean, there was a lot of really cool stuff that all kind of stacked together. Now we kind of take
Yeah.
it for granted, but back then, I mean, I remember being blown away by the graphical fidelity of it, and then I pop in my GameCube and I got the digital out, so I plug an HDMI cable and I put it, and I'm like, wait, it's you look back on old games and you're like, you have this vision in your head of how they look, and then they don't look
Yeah.
how you remember. Like it looked better
Right.
than that game looks exactly how I remembered it. Like it hasn't changed. It's like I can picture it in my head clearly, and the fur effects stand up. Like I'm still blown away. Like sometimes I'll just watch like an animation, and like Fox is like swaying, and you just see like the subtle, the subtle effects on the cheek fur. I just love it. It's such a cool game. I love the vibes. But going into the whole Dinosaur Planet, so you're
Yeah.
familiar with the fan project that they're all like
Well,
restoring
I'm
it
only just
basically.
kind of figuring it out, to be honest. I'm assuming it's based on some sort of leaked build that went out a while
Yeah.
back that I vaguely heard about ages ago, but I don't know much about it. And I'm suddenly looking on YouTube, and there's people like breaking down the models and showing the structure of like all kinds of stuff going on under the hood. And I'm like, whoa, how are you seeing all this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's a build. It's a build from an E3 presentation, I believe. I
Mhm.
can't remember off the top of my head what year it was, but it was the transitional period between Dinosaur Planet and Star Fox. So Fox will, he looks like Fox, and he'll say he's Fox, but the dialogue underneath will say he's Saber. And
Oh,
so it's
interesting.
it's very interesting. It's a very like middle ground sort of a build, but they've also restored the actual saber model within the game,
Yeah.
and so that's fully functioning at this point. So you can play a
Okay.
saber throughout the entire thing, but it's still really interesting to look back and see the vision for Dinosaur Planet being there
Yeah.
versus what we got with Star Fox, which I kind of appreciate both, but it is sort of like this nagging thing. We'd be like, well, what if Dinosaur Planet was completed with the original vision? Did you have any like favorite moments from the Dinosaur Planet side of things that you saw that you were like, oh my gosh, I love this, and then Star Fox, it sort of morphed into
Yeah,
that, and you're like, ah, man, why did we?
I did. Yeah, yeah. There was, I mean, there's two aspects to that. One is there was a sequence that I worked on. Things were going slower and quieter for a while, and no one was really sure why. And it turned out it's because we were transitioning into Star Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically given free reign to work on this epic sequence where Saber was no, was it? I'm trying to remember if it may have even been slightly started as Star Fox at that time. I'm not sure, but basically there was this insane sequence that I generated with almost all the dinosaurs in it. It was very elaborate, um, and no one ever got to see it. No one saw
Oh,
it
oh,
because that was at the point where they just said, "Okay, complete reset, change everything." But one of the other things about it, and this wasn't my loss, but was actually a friend of mine, for quite a chunk of the production, I was one of two sequence animators working on all the sequences. And my other friend David, he actually worked on most of what was then Crystal and Kite's sequences, whilst I had
oh.
Saber and Tricky's sequences. I'm sure there was a little bit of bleeding over, but basically he specialized in that character and I specialized in that character. And when they made the decision to upgrade everything, they were also making decisions about what to cut in order to make a particular deadline. And unfortunately, they cut a very large portion of the Crystal and Kite side of the game, which was a huge loss for him. He lost tons of work. There were small elements of what he'd worked on that made it into the game, and I later on got my hands on those sequences and polished them up for like high fidelity visuals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, that was like one of the biggest losses. It basically had to become the Saber game, or Starfox game, you know.
Yeah. So you sort of drew the lucky straw there.
I did, yeah. It was 50-50, you know. I didn't know I got that lucky at that time. But, you know, I mean, we went through a lot of tough times there. I mean, when I first started on the project, I was under the impression it was 6 months till shipping. And the problem with that is that you put in your biggest energy to try and get to finish the thing in time. So you end up doing a lot of late nights and things like that in order to get the game out on a certain schedule. But almost towards the end of that 6 months, we were told, "Oh no, it's going to be another 6 months." So you put in the same level of energy to keep pushing to do the next 6 months, except that they then did it again and again and again
Oh.
and again. And so for 3 years solid, I was basically in final crunch on this game, and so it definitely was a challenge. And we finally shipped this thing as Starfox Adventures on another platform because we went from N64 up to GameCube. And you know, we were all quite proud of what we'd have done, but there was also, you know, there was a lot of changes and things that had happened along the way. It was a challenging time. And then, of course, Rare announced that they'd been bought out by Microsoft almost the next day.
Oh man.
So big things happened during those days.
At least you
Yeah,
didn't have to
funny.
port it over to Xbox, right? I mean, 64 to
No,
GameCube.
that's right. Yes, no. So I did it to. That's right. Yeah, we were on GameCube, and God, it's such a long time ago. It's all getting a little
Right?
bit vague. Yes, it came out as a GameCube game. I have that box that you've got right behind me on my shelf downstairs. I've got a few props I can hold up here
Oh,
to do with some
absolutely.
of this stuff, by the way. We've got some old magazines and things.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and then we've got an old Nintendo Power.
Oh man, they're like
Kept,
pristine too.
kept those things around. A couple of old T-shirts. This was the favorite that I wore at E3, the famous E3, where
Oh my
everyone
gosh.
they actually sent about 50 people from Rare to go to E3 that year. And this is a crappy T-shirt I don't wear very often. The green one I've worn out though, so I never wear that one anymore because I don't want to destroy it any further than it already
Yeah, that
is.
Dinosaur Planet, that's it's almost like another special piece. Like Star Fox Adventures is a special piece of history, your history, but just in general gaming history. And then Dinosaur
Yes,
Planet, it's that one of those biggest like what if,
yes,
scenarios. And I mean, just the fact that there's an entire community around it, and they're just like rebuilding the game essentially. They're like,
yes.
obviously they have to take liberties here, but they're like fixing things like, oh, that wall's broken, we need to extend that out. Like, I don't know how they're sort of reverse engineering this, but it's amazing. And I played through. I did a live stream playing through to the end. Like you can
Mhm.
complete the game. You need some clipping tools and things to get by certain obstacles, but for the majority of the game, I didn't really need to use that. There was like one specific point in like a desert area, which also totally different areas that didn't exist in Star Fox Adventures that existed in Dinosaur Planet. A lot of interesting stuff. Like there was an entire desert that you could roam in, and like giant like totem things that would come out of the ground. Like it
Sounds
was
familiar. Yes.
a lot of really cool stuff. And I'm like, oh man, like it's such a shame that the whole warp stone area, like the fact there's two warp stones and they like talk with each other, and you can like go in this like little hub area. It gave it a hub. I mean, Thorntail Hollow in the GameCube version is essentially the hub, but it's not really a hub. It's its own
Yeah,
thing,
the warp stone was one of the more complicated sequences that I had to create because it was essentially an interactive sequence. So it was like a series of timelines where you would go along. Think of it as a read your own adventure, and it
Mm-hmm.
tells you in the book to go to a different page. That's what had to happen in that sequence. I'm sure they do an awful lot more of that stuff now, but at the time it was quite innovative. We had to create all these skip marks to make it jump to here, and then it would play and match up perfectly. And it was just one giant, great big sequence. And funnily enough, Lee lent on me a number of times to kind of fill the gaps when when we had some problems that we were running out of time to do certain things. I would have to do some elaborate sequences that kind of just pulled this piece of the game towards this piece of the game and made the story logic work between the two, things like that. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of stuff in that game. I think though that I don't know whether people would remember it as well if it hadn't become Star Fox, you know?
Right. Right.
Um,
There's that
I mean,
popular IP
may
attachment.
exactly. I mean, maybe it could have been its own big thing and people would remember it like Banjo Kazooie, like it's Rare's giant swing for the fences to do a Zelda style game. That would have been amazing, and that's what we'd all hoped to be doing at the time. But also, I was kind of excited when, because I love Star Fox, when I found out that it could become the Star Fox IP. Didn't necessarily realize how difficult it was going to be and how much of a challenge it was going to be because the expectation that the audience has when they're getting a Star Fox game is not a Zelda game, you know.
Right.
And I was watching the videos recently about people commenting on Star Fox having a staff, and I can't really remember what my thought processes were at the time, but yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why does Star Fox not have a blaster?
Yeah.
Um,
I think they comment on it on the beginning. He's like, "Why couldn't I bring my blaster?" And then they're like, "This is a diplomatic mission or something." They're like, "You'll figure it out." it's
yeah,
it's like, all
I
right.
that was above my pay grade. I think Lee just had to write something there to smooth that topic over.
Yeah.
But it really, in hindsight, if you're just looking at it from a player's point of view, it doesn't make an awful lot of sense when you look back on it. But also, I think we all learned an awful lot about player expectations because there was a bit of a backlash over at the time about the fact that it wasn't a Star Fox flying shooting game at its heart. That was basically tacked on, and I think we did a pretty decent job of cramming it in there. But that everybody knows that that's what it was.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that too? Because I think Star Fox 64 was obviously like that was a big game for the N64. Everyone I knew had it. We all loved it. For better or worse, it was a great game. The multiplayer sort of teased us with being on foot and running around. If you sort of beat missions and got a high enough score, you could unlock on foot in multiplayer. And I
I
remember
remember
that
that.
being a huge point of discussion between me and my friends. We're like, oh my gosh, how cool would it be to have a Star Fox game, but you're on foot? Like, that was the thing we talked about. So it's funny to hear that, like, yeah, of course, you get the diehard Star Fox fans that are just like, it's not what I'm used to. Even though technically they only released, like, what, 2 games before that? I
Well,
mean,
that's yeah, that is the irony of it. I mean, at that point, Mario had already been all kinds of different types of things, so it was
right.
not unusual to take a Nintendo IP and turn it into a different kind of game. So that was probably their thinking at the time. But yeah, everyone's idea of what Star Fox should be is a lot narrower at the moment. Still is to some degree. It's like he can be in a side-on-side brawler now, but only if he's got his blaster, sort of thing.
Right. I think
But
I
that
think if you
didn't.
give them some cool gadgets and you don't fully take away the R wing, you don't fully take away the Landmaster tank, like people accept it. It's cool.
Yeah.
But what
But it was
what's
pretty cool. Sorry, go on.
oh I was gonna ask you what your favorite part of that game was that you were involved in. Like what's your favorite sequence that you animated? What's the little detail that you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing and no one ever talks about it?
I don't know, but I was only just reminded of the Dracor boss sequence,
Yes.
which, funnily enough, I remember thinking. For some reason, I thought maybe it had gotten cut or something because I was like, I haven't seen that for ages.
I
Did
mean
that not
basically
in the
it's
game?
in there.
Okay,
It's in there, but it's also like why is it in there? They don't really.
right.
I don't know that it really gets explained. Were you involved in the Dinosaur Planet side of that and that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
boss fight? So
yep.
way more epic.
Hmm.
Because actually, if you go and watch my Dinosaur Planet video, you can go in the end. I do the fight. It's hilarious. It's almost it's almost better because the hit is just one hit in this current build. So like
Right.
it hypes him up. He's this big bad, like planets like circling around him, like it looks epic. He's like, oh, and then you hit him once, and he's like, oh, and he falls down and dies, which is it's awesome. But in the GameCube one, yeah, he was much more fleshed out, but also not at the same time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that there was definitely some deadlines that had to be met at some point. I know that the General Scales boss was a bit of a disappointment, and that was one of those ones where I was pulled in to try and bridge the gap a little bit because we just didn't have
Yeah,
the resources to have someone work on that. Um, and I appreciate that now as a game director myself, because we just did similar stuff in our own game where we're just like, I can see how long it takes a programmer to figure out that boss. We have to cut a boss because we cannot have the resources and the extra 6 months it's going to take to add that boss. So you have to draw the line somewhere, and bosses are big, complicated things. And so I
Yeah.
completely understand everything that Lee was going through at the time, trying to figure out how to make it all make sense. And pull together all these things, because we'd spent lots of time building up characters and then we didn't get to pay them off quite as much as we would
Right.
like to.
Yeah, that's
Um,
the thing. I think that's what does the general scales dirty. Like everyone is like, "Oh my gosh, I wish we had a boss," because he's such a cool character. He really is. And you hype him up so much and you just think there's going to be this epic finale, and then there was, but it just like totally did like a 180. I'm like, "Oh, okay."
yes.
And Andros
Well,
is
I
cool
mean,
though. I mean,
it was important we had to get Andros in there. There was no
yeah.
way we were going to make a Star Fox game without Andros in there, and so that's where the resources had to go. Yeah, it just is what it was. And one of those weird things that we figured out at the time, and I have a much more of appreciation now that I've had to do my own game that way.
So hypothetically, if you had to cut a boss, which boss would you have cut?
I mean, he didn't exist yet, Scales, so I mean, sure, it's easy to see him cut because we didn't have anything yet. Um, but funnily enough, uh, the T Rex irks me a little bit
Really?
because, yeah, because they made him too big. He's way too big. He was supposed to be probably about a fifth of that size. And they just kept saying, "No, he's got to be bigger. He's got to be bigger. He's got to be bigger." Until all that's left is you're fighting nothing, nothing, nothing. Giant toad crashes you.
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing. Giant toad crushes you. That's what happens when you're fighting with something that's that much bigger. And I mean, I learned my lesson is in that I could again. I was bridging the gap. I used sequences and the space, the distance from Fox at one end of a corridor to the dinosaur at the other corridor to sort of bring them together and make it look like they're in the same space. But when it was so big, it was ridiculous. Um, I think I might have actually done the in-game animations for that. I don't want to take credit though. Where it's very hard over the years.
Right.
You're so involved in something and you've lived it that you start to years later look back and you can't quite remember exactly who did what. You just know you were involved in it all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I know I did the sequences for it, but I can't remember if I also did the in-game animations for it. I mostly didn't do in-game animations for Star Fox. There were a couple of other people who did the in-game animations, and I was mostly focused on sequences, so I don't want to claim it. Um, but yeah, I mean, essentially, that T Rex just had to like walk in straight line, turn 90 degrees, walk in straight line, turn 90 degrees. And yeah, but I just wish he wasn't so big. And it wasn't the last time that would be a challenge, to be honest. We went through similar things on Cameo as well.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a good segue. Let me just say that whole sequence, that whole fight sequence, that boss fight, it does look really cool.
Yeah,
Like for
yeah,
better or worse, it does look really cool having him giant, and then you get the moment at the end where you like pry the spell stone out of his forehead or whatever. It was pretty cool.
right. Actually, yeah, that was when The Matrix had just come out. And so I got to do this thing where he like backflips off of
Yes.
the T Rex with the staff and narrowly avoid being bitten, but in slow mo kind of thing, which was very challenging at the time because now you would use IK to do those things in. And back then we only had FK. I don't know if any of your animation listeners know what that means, but basically it was really hard, and there was a lot of manual noodling. Like the skeleton of the character would flip out and do crazy stuff that it wasn't supposed to do between frames, and I had to go in there manually putting limbs back where they were supposed to be. It was very, very hard, and in subsequent years, I would learn all these tricks for doing things way better. I mean, the things that I didn't know back then, you could fill a book with.
But it turned out great and it looked epic because I can like picture that scene vividly in my head. It's one of the few, not one of the few. There's quite a few actually in that game. I think it's pretty iconic. I think it's sort of a cult following sort of situation, which I feel like if it was Dinosaur Planet, it may have had an even bigger cult following. Like maybe it wouldn't have
Maybe.
sold as well, but I just feel like it's one of those games like because it has a cult following and the game never even released, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like,
But I
imagine.
mean, when the game came out, it was pre-sold at, I think I want to say it was 1.4 million copies to Walmart instantly, and it because of it was Star Fox,
Yeah.
and you can't get that kind of thing through other IP. It would have been a slower burn, and you would just keeping your fingers crossed that the reviews would be good enough to get it up to where it needed to be. Um, but so yeah, it was a great start to my career, starting with that many
What
copies
a
sold.
yeah, what a crazy thing. Like, what's your first game? Star Fox. Like, that's a pretty big claim to fame. I would say.
Yeah, except that these days it's like Star Fox. Whoa, you worked on Star Fox, followed by Adventures. Ah, right.
Oh man, I would be hyped, man. I'd be like, yeah, I did.
There still are people who are. I mean, I got a neighbor across the road who's telling me how he was playing it when he was a kid too. So I guess that yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia there, and actually that's one of those things. Is like at the time, there may have been some difficulties while I was working there, but at the end of the day, I look back very fondly on those years now, and I've actually been making connections more recently because I've been making games again
Hmm.
with those same people and reaching out and saying, "How, hi, what have you been doing? Like, what have you been doing for 20 years?"
And you're like, check my website, scroll down, you'll see it all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Movies, commercials, you name it, I've done it.
Yeah.
But speaking of,
Mhm.
big projects, you went from Star Fox. Did you go straight to Cameo? Is there a little
Uh,
little gap in there? I'm trying to think.
not quite. Not quite. So there was a Banjo racing game in between uh, that I did some work on,
You just threw a
and
curveball. You just blew my mind. I'm like, oh man.
yeah, I mean, basically, that version of that game did not come out. However, they later went and did Banjo Nuts and Bolts,
Hmm.
and so I think that it's safe to say there was some connection between one project and the other. They wanted to do it. It was going to come out in some form at some point, but I think it changed an awful lot between what I worked on and what they worked on.
Yeah, I think on your website you had a little banjo like storyboard sequence. If
That's
I'm
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I I basically storyboarded out. Funnily enough, there's another piece that it doesn't exist anywhere. Um, I don't know if you know Nick Southam. He was a concept artist and animator. He animated on Star Fox and then became a concept artist, and he's done lots and lots of stuff. And he storyboarded working with me as the editor and sort of like filmmaker on this Star Fox sequence. Can't remember where in the life of things this was, but basically we had a bit of downtime, so we were creating this amazing sequence we were going to do with Star Fox, and we pulled all the old music from the old games, and it was going to be this incredible thing. But it's never seen the light of day. I have never seen it exist anywhere, so I don't think that leaked anywhere or anything like that. But that was amazing. But then after that, we went on to do this banjo thing, and then yes, I got the opportunity to storyboard and what was basically just trying to communicate the idea of what a banjo racing game might be.
Hmm.
And I was reaching though because really I was a character and a story sequence guy, and so I was trying to figure out how do I fit in to this racing game. Um, many of the people who were on the team had previously worked on Diddy Kong Racing, so they already had a lot of experience making that sort of game, and I hadn't. I wasn't sure whether I was going to be a fit for it or not. So I was just trying to figure out what can I do to do cool stuff and bring something to the table, and I made that little sequence. It never went anywhere though. The whole team at some point was put on pause, and we were told that the vast majority of us were going to move over to work on Cameo.
Oh.
And I can't remember exactly where things were, but somewhere fairly early on, I became the lead animator on Cameo. And then we hired a couple of other animators, and I was mostly doing the sequences while those other two animators were doing the in-game stuff and real-time sequences, because we had like real-time sequences and pre-rendered sequences. Sorry, I'm moving you towards Kameo, but it's up to
Yeah.
you.
Well, I'm fine with moving towards Cameo, but I do have a question because, like, the shift between Nintendo and Xbox, 2002 ish, right? Ish, somewhere around there. But you mentioned, so after Star Fox
Yeah.
Adventures, it was like after that released, that was when you heard word that it was like the Microsoft transition.
Yes, somewhere around there. I can't remember what the exact order of events were, but the world didn't know about the
Right.
buyout until just after the Star Fox release, which was a bit of a bummer for us as a team because we were expecting to be talking about our game for a while, and then like 2 days later or something, the news came out about the buyout, and all of a sudden that was the new hot topic.
Yeah.
So we kind of got a little bit drowned in the news cycle at the time because of that. But in the long run, it all worked out. I mean, working for Microsoft back then was fantastic. Whatever might have been wrong about things that were happening at Rare at the time kind of got smoothed out, and it became a more
Hmm.
family-friendly company while I was working there. And so I did another 4 years working for Rare as Microsoft.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you have the diehard fans. I'm a diehard fan, but I'm definitely not one that's like, oh, when Microsoft bought them, everything changed. I equally like the stuff that they put out under Microsoft, Viva Pinata, Cameo, love it all. Ghoulies, I'm playing Ghoulies on a live stream for Halloween. Like, I love it. I
Yes.
think the charm. Sea of Thieves, I love Sea of Thieves. Like, I don't know why it's so taboo to be like, I like what they made now and I like what they made then. I think we just want more love to the old classics, which actually really hasn't been Rare style. Like, they're more one-offs than sequels. Like, I feel like Banjo Tooie might have and Nuts and Bolts were like exceptions. Even Perfect Dark, like for the most part, it's pretty much one-offs. Like they were interested in making new IPs constantly over and over, which is something I also appreciate. Like I always like having a new experience. But the reason I brought up the transition in the first place was because there are actually builds of Cameo that you can see that were like, I don't know if they're E3 demos or something, where you can actually see like the GameCube control scheme up in the HUD, like the
Yeah,
A, B, X, Y. So Cameo is one
that's
of
right.
those games that sort of spanned a couple
Mm-hmm.
generations,
It did,
and
yeah.
and then ultimately, whatever the decision was to release it as a launch title for the 360, which probably was for the best, but that GameCube element. When were you throwing it? Because you're a lead animator, so you had to been.
Yeah, well, I was on it as a GameCube person all the way through to Xbox person. But no, hey, let me get this straight. I wonder if it was already moving towards Xbox original. I call it original rather than one because that's confusing now.
Yeah, right.
Um, uh,
They gotta work in the names.
I want to say that we were being brought over towards it when it was a GameCube game, but then they were going to transition to becoming the first Xbox game, which opened up some possibilities because all of a sudden we were going to have more storage to play with things. So we did real time, pre-rendered cutscenes, which would allow me to do all kinds of visual effects and things like that. But then, yes, I was there as well when they transitioned to Xbox 360, and all of a sudden everything had to be HD.
Yeah.
And I'd done all these cinematics that were pre-rendered locked to a certain resolution for the first Xbox, only for them to say, okay, now we're making a console that's for HD. Now, in hindsight, at the time, they said, it's okay, you can just up-res the videos from one to the other and they'll be totally fine. And I was like, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. Although I would like to think that because I don't want to redo all this work. I'm not convinced. So they actually did a test for me. They put this gigantic HD TV in a conference room somewhere.
How
One of
big we
the earliest.
talking?
Oh, I mean, at the time it was colossal, but it's like what it's in everyone's living room now. But it was like one end of this big conference room, and I said the ultimate test is I'm going to go and look at my. I'm going to upres. I'm going to make one of the cinematics in full HD, and put it up alongside the original. that hadn't been increased in resolution yet. Put it on this TV. I'm going to go and stand at the other end of the conference room and look at it and try and make a decision about whether the average viewer cares. You know, because could we ship a game with low resolution cinematics? Could we get away with that? And the answer was no. I looked at this thing across the room and I was just like, I'm going to have to re-render and rework every single scene I've been doing for the last few years. Um, but I'm glad we did it because now those things live on in HD and
Yeah,
they look awesome. I
hold
mean,
up a lot better for
yeah, I
sure.
think
I
if we
mean,
had launched with like up-resed Xbox One cinematics, people would have been criticizing us for how they didn't look very good. But it was a lot of extra work. I had to go into every single scene and recreate it again, basically. And some of the stuff just didn't hold up at HD, and so you've got to do more with it.
right.
So there was a lot of modifications and things we were making then. Yeah.
There's also a really interesting build of the game that is available, though you have to have a sort of modded Xbox original.
Mhm.
I think you have to upgrade the RAM to like 128 megs or whatever it is. Um, but it you can play a build of Cameo that was on the original Xbox, which I don't know.
That,
I don't know where
I
these
wonder
things come from, but I love it.
No, I don't know where that's from either, but my best guess is that must be because the build will have been for a dev kit, and
Hmm.
the dev kits were these custom pieces of hardware that look a bit like an Xbox, but they were a special color and they had extra hardware in there to make them more capable,
Yeah,
because you then optimize it down to work on the base version, the consumer version. So my best guess is, yeah, you added the RAM in there in order to handle this build that hadn't yet been optimized all the way down to consumer-ready hardware.
yeah, and honestly, like looked gorgeous. From
Hmm.
I personally don't have a modded original Xbox. I just have the base console.
Hmm.
But seeing clips of it online, I'm just like I'm amazed at what
Yeah,
the team was able to
yeah,
pull off on that hardware. Like it looks
that
almost as
game
good as the 360.
that game is always great looking. I remember seeing early versions of it, being quite jealous that we were still making this other Starfox game, and they was just, oh my God, look at what they're making over there. So it was kind of exciting when we got to move over and work on that game. But the concept changed over time. I know that the earlier stuff that we were seeing didn't quite make it, and it got pared down to what was working.
Hmm.
Funnily enough, I would say that that is the template that later Skylanders would go off and rip off and do in various different things. Every time I see my son playing Skylanders now, I'm just like, that's straight out of Cameo. That's straight out of Cameo. And it was from years earlier, but no one really remembers Cameo. And Skylanders is this huge
I
thing
do.
now. Yeah.
I love Cameo. I actually, it's really cool. I did a big video essay about it, and someone who owns the like Cameo fans Discord server like reached out to me and was like, "Oh, come join." It's just filled with hundreds of people that just love Cameo. So like they're out there. Um,
Yes.
one sequence I wanted to talk about in particular, I really the Badlands, okay, with just the massive sprawling amount of
Oh.
soldiers and enemies just like moving around constantly.
Mhm.
Tell me about that, because that has to be a ton of work.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of amazing for its time, but really the credit for that one goes to Nick Burton, who was, I think he still works for Microsoft actually, and he was a very talented programmer who managed to get that quantity of characters on the screen at the time. Um, Funnily enough, when they first said we were switching from N64 to GameCube, we were promised games with way more characters in them, but that never panned out. I think that that's a common misconception in games that
Hmm.
you think you're going to get slightly better visuals, but way more characters, and really what ends up happening is you end up getting the same number of characters with more visual fidelity pumped into
Right.
those same characters. So that was one example, though, of where we did put more characters on the screen. I couldn't say I was heavily involved in that, but I want to say I did something with the horse.
The horse
Maybe I
is
did the
beautiful.
horse cycles. I can't remember now. If I didn't, then it was Nick, I would guess. But no, I can't remember. I won't claim credit for that one. I just know that I worked on it enough to that it's scarred into my mind. Um, but oh, hang on, before I forget. So we've got some couple of things here.
Stuff's coming off
So
the wall.
over here we have, since we're talking about Cameo, this was the signed artwork that we all ended up with, where everyone on the team
So
signed
cool.
it to sort of say they worked on it, which was super cool. And as you can see, I've been had them on my wall ever since. And then
As
over
you
here,
should.
yes, and then over here we've got
Oh wow.
Starfox fully signed. Like, let's see if I can get a good picture without actually getting a reflection on it.
Oh,
There
it's
you
so
go.
cool.
There you go. Yeah, so those have been pride of place on my wall ever since. I think that one's slightly faded now.
Uh-oh. I thought it looked good on camera. I don't know.
Yeah. And then, we just kind of like old memorabilia sitting around that I'm still hanging on to, old t-shirts. I actually still wear the t-shirts. The t-shirts are good.
I would too.
Uh, yeah.
They're
There's a
awesome.
few there's a few of those. This one's a good one too. I like that one. Yeah.
Okay, which
But
one what's your favorite elemental?
it's a combination of this guy and this guy.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I always liked him. He was really cool. And if I'm playing it now, I that's one of the earlier characters you have access to,
Mhm.
and it's definitely one of my favorites, the Flower Boxer.
He
He wasn't called Flower Boxer in the end. I forget what his official name was, but that's what I
Pummelead.
called him. Pummelead, that's right.
Pummelead.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he flower boxer. Interesting.
That's what we called
That's
him
a cool
internally.
that's a cool little tidbit. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the monster character variation is what makes that game cool, I think.
Mm.
Like really like I've had people that sort of get into it and the game almost starts out a little bit slower. Like it's good that it did what it did and like immediately throwing you into that castle battle and giving you a few transformations before it
Mhm.
sort of strips it back and then it's like you start with one, you build it up. And like I've had people that they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, I was like it was cool and then I only have one transformation, it gets like a little slower paced, you know."
Mhm.
And I'm like, "Write it out, get a couple transformations and then it's like quick switching between them. That's when the gameplay loop gets really good." Like
Mhm.
it's awesome. I love it. And I 40 Below is probably my favorite. I just sit there. He's the big chill guy on the snowball, but because you can
Yeah.
just like spin around and just do like a spin attack and just obliterate everything in sight. Like once I
Mm.
got him, I was just like, well, this is who I'm gonna be now.
Yeah, and I actually got to do all of the cinematics that introduced them all. So those were almost entirely created by me. I wasn't given a script or anything. It was just like, okay, what cool transformation? All they said was that he needs to look like this at the beginning and this at the end. Do what you want in between. So I just
That's
made up
awesome.
all that stuff that happened on screen to transform them. And that was some of the most fun stuff I got to work on. Other than that, there was all the story stuff. I mean, we did a lot of really cool cinematics for Cameo. It was like making a small movie.
Yeah, it is. It's
But
very.
there's a few things in there that are a bit what I would call janky now.
I
Like
don't notice.
there's one shot at the end where you're doing a wide shot of the entire flying battleship, and it's blowing up and falling down. And the filmmaker in me now, who's worked on all these movies and things, looks at it and just goes, "Ooh, I did the wrong lens on that. It looks really small. It looks like it's a space. The ship's about this big instead of this gargantuan thing." So if I had a chance, I would have changed that. But other than that,
um,
no, there was a lot of stuff to be proud of though in Kemia,
that
and
opening sequence,
oh, the one
amazing.
through the clouds.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I love it. That's one of my favorite clips, and actually, probably the most used clip on my channel for like as far as in-game cinematics go.
I
I
saw it.
always yeah, you
I
saw
saw it being used.
it. Yeah.
I was like, wow, the number of times I've seen that over the years. Well, you know why it exists? Because Microsoft had just built a massive server farm where no one was using it yet. And I was the only person who had any clue how to utilize it. I basically was like, well, I know how to make a render farm out of that. And what's computationally heavy? Clouds.
Clouds.
And so we had this idea about drifting through the clouds and showing little memories of things that would be happening later and stuff like that, and what had happened in the past and the future and all this kind of stuff. And so I made a sequence in the clouds, and it had this set up this render farm where we could churn away and take advantage of that computing power right before anybody else in the company had any access to it because they didn't really know how to utilize it at the time. Um, so there
I
you go. That's why that exists.
That's awesome. That's the only thing that I think I would point out about Kameo. I'd be like, I wish there was a level dedicated to like being in that cloudscape because it would have been so cool. Unless there isn't, I'm just
Yeah.
misremembering, but it would have been
No,
awesome.
no, no. You're it's tricky though. When it sounds like it would be cool to fly around in big open spaces like that, but it's actually boring. And if you, it's more interesting when you can move through smaller spaces that are close to you with other things in the distance. I learned a lot about this when making the Pheonix Gene game that we were just working on. And it's like, do you remember the game Pilot Wings?
Yes. Yep.
Um,
SNES or
you're
64.
right. Well, Pilot Wings, you were basically forced to. They had to put something out in front of you to go through. Otherwise, it wasn't very interesting. Because imagine if they hadn't put the rings out that you had to go through, it would be really boring, right? You're just falling. Now what? You just wait until you hit the ground.
Yeah.
And and so that's the thing. If you're flying around with nothingness, it can be a bit dull. It's actually one of the criticisms I have for some, say, flying games, and why I was drawn more towards Star Fox as a model for the game I later went on to make,
Hmm.
because it's like it's more about how you're narrowly missing these really cool things that you're flying near. That's way more interesting than flying in a big open space where you can go anywhere.
That's true. The thrill I get from Star Fox 64, and there's a specific sequence where like these asteroids are closing in like this, and it's like use the boost to get through. You fly through super fast, but you just narrowly miss it, and it's
Yes.
like the same every time because you just do the same thing every time. But it's pretty epic. And if there
Yeah.
weren't asteroids like floating around everywhere, it definitely wouldn't feel as fulfilling. Something like Superman 64 can get called out for
I
artificially
want
just putting rings.
I want to say that there was a boss I was hoping to get to make that was, I think it was somewhere in the transition um, from Dinosaur Planet to Starfox Adventures, where I was really hoping to do this um, T-Rex storming through a valley sequence while you would be on a speeder bike and you would be right alongside this T-Rex. And the idea was that the valley was made up into imagine that's the base of the valley.
Hmm.
Then there was a tier here and a tier here, and then the walls either side of that. And the idea was that you would be moving your speeder bike between the three different tiers, and the T Rex was always in the middle. That was what I was hoping to make. And the T Rex could be snapping at you as you're trying to dodge around.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make this thing, and I was really pitching it to Lee, and I was hoping that we were going to get to do this thing, and it just kind of it got snapped out
Lost.
by all the
Yeah.
other stuff that we were doing. So I've always had it in my mind, and it's something that I still would love to make at some point. I got to do some sort of similar stuff in the game that we just made as well, though. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was saying I keep that in mind when I was playing Pheonix Gene. But to segue a little bit out of Cameo,
Mhm.
so you sort of alluded to being at least somewhat involved or seeing some behind the scenes stuff at Rare that you weren't maybe necessarily like.
Right. Well, there's some things I probably still can't talk about, but some things I've seen out there.
Oh, you can
So
talk about it. Come on.
like I know there was I don't remember what it was called, but there was my good friend Johnny Christensen who was the person who brought me, who sat next to me for the first 6 months I was at Rare, teaching me how to do everything. Um, he went over to become the lead artist on a game that was characters riding on animals racing around a landscape. Um, and I've seen footage
Okay.
of that
Yeah.
on YouTube, so somebody must have leaked something.
Yes. I think it started as a Donkey Kong racing, and it was initially a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing, and it was Donkey Kong riding animals, and then that got scrapped, and it changed over to Saberman, I think, and it was like a Saberman Safari like riding on animals, unless you're talking about something totally different, in which case I'm even
No,
more
no.
curious.
It was the Safari Man riding on animals thing, and I saw
Yeah.
it briefly. I'll be honest, I wasn't involved in it. I just knew it was going on, and it looked like an interesting project with lots of characters, and it would have been cool to work on. But it ultimately did get canned. Um, I want to say though that the history people have said about how it was created sounds a little bit like mashing a few bunch of different ideas together that may have been years apart and completely unconnected.
Mm.
But so that was one thing that I did get to see a little bit of, and because I've seen it out in the wild, it's like okay, I can mention that. But that's um, other than that. Funnily enough, I didn't have a huge amount to do with Perfect Dark. I would have liked to, but that was like that was the biggest project going on in reality. They had more team members than we did.
Really?
Uh, yeah,
That's
I'm pretty
interesting.
sure. I'm pretty sure their team was bigger than ours, and they were using the mocaps studio and everything for their stuff. I was kind of hoping that I'd get a chance to work on it a little bit before it released, but the only thing I managed to do was I worked on the opening logo. They did it. They had me basically just churn out different rare logos because to keep me busy and because they didn't have any ideas for what they could use,
Yeah.
and this was on the list, and I was like, yeah, I can do something with that. So there was me and another guy, a different Lee, who worked on Lee Musgrave, I think it was, and we each did different versions of logos, and I kind of assumed that my logo was going to end up on Kameo, and his logo was going to end up on Perfect Dark. But the Perfect Dark team voted to have my logo on their game.
That's awesome.
And so we ended up, the Cameo logo came from Lee, and the Jet Set um, Rare logo that I made ended up on Perfect Dark. So in terms of what of my work actually ended up in Perfect
Yeah.
Dark, that's it. The logo. The first few seconds, that's it.
Hey, that's pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie. I've been playing through Perfect Dark on Perfect Agent. God help me. It has been it has been crazy. Games were so much harder back then.
Yeah. I saw that you were doing it in VR as well, the original.
Yeah, there's someone is basically recreating it from the ground up in VR. It started out as like a was it Gary's mod or Bone Labs or something. It was like some sort of mod within a game that they were like converting it, and then they're like, well, I'm sort of limited by what I'm
Pavlov.
doing. Pavlov. That was it.
Pavlov.
Yep, Pavlov.
Yeah.
And so they started like recreating Perfect Dark in VR, and it's actually pretty cool. To go back to your point that you started this conversation with about like peeking around corners and stuff, so helpful in Perfect Dark. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I wish I could do it now. Like I'm on the last like two missions on 64, and I'm Perfect Agent. It's like I think I spent 5 hours. I was like streaming for 5 hours, and I
Mm.
did not beat this mission. I was like, come on, guys, like give me tips, like tell me what to do, because
Yeah.
I'm just getting defeated. And I was like, but I don't quit. I'm not gonna reduce the difficulty. I've committed. I've gotten this far. I've got two missions left. I can do this. But the amount of times that I've seen that rare logo,
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that was mine. I also did some co-op trailer where I was showcasing how they were intermingling two people playing through the same mission from different points of view. That was very cool because that was the first time I'd ever
mm,
seen that done before. It's pretty common now, but back then, I think it was like the first time I'd ever seen that done. And so we were trying to showcase how to, like, one player's over here doing a certain thing, and then another player's over here along a similar track that can see each other from across the valley or something. And but something that would happen here would affect what this character over here was doing, and so on. And to be honest, it's one of those things where because players used to play on the same TV in split screen at the time,
mm-hmm.
it was far more common then than it is now. I wish we had more of that now,
I
but
do too.
everyone's doing everything online now, and it doesn't quite feel the same.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's a mixed bag for me because I do miss that experience of having my friends over and playing on the single screen. And sometimes we do that, but at the same time I also like having my own screen and like setting it up the way I'd like it, cuz sometimes you'd be playing and be like, "Oh man, if only I had like a slightly wider viewing angle, I'd be able to play this." Or on the 64's case, like maybe the FPS would be a little bit better. Um
yeah, yeah.
but yeah,
But you,
it
you
is
you
cool.
kind of reminded me though, in terms of other projects that I didn't quite work on. A big one for me, honestly, was Conquer. Now, at some point prior to that big E3 where they sent 50 people over to E3 to show off Dinosaur Planet, they also had Conquer. Those were the two big titles that they were trying to show off. And what they did at one point was we swapped games for a little while just before E3 so that we could playtest en masse. So all of a sudden, Dinosaur Planet team, everyone's playing Conquer in order to try and like playtest the thing to death and see what we can break. But it was amazing because like we'd not seen anything. Like there were all these separate barns at Rare where you don't really see anything that's
Right.
going on. And so all of a sudden we kind of knew bits and bobs about it, but not very much. And all of a sudden we were going to see everything, and that's an amazing experience. That game was excellent, although very dated now. If you play it now, it's quite frustrating. But the humor in it was
Yeah.
fantastic, but it was also controversial. We went to E3 with that one, and anybody who was wearing the any of the Rare T-shirts, so half the team was wearing this, and half the team was wearing the Conquer T-shirt. I've got one of those down here. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
I was
can't
like,
point it without showing. There was. This is a bit of a
oh
weird.
man.
I don't quite.
Diddly DJ.
I don't know. So I got a few of those things, but
That's awesome.
there was two large teams from Rare going to E3, and I just remember being on the bus with the Nintendo folks, and they weren't very happy at us for making Conquer. And we
Oh,
were
okay.
catching some of those vibes just because we worked for Rare.
Yeah.
They weren't very happy because it wasn't family friendly, and it wasn't something that they could agree with at the time. So I do remember there being a bit of controversy around it at the time, and but we were proud to have been a part of it in some small way.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that and get that confirmation because being on the online sphere, like I hear a lot of different things getting thrown out there. Like people are like, "Yeah, Nintendo like this is why they sold Rare because of Conquer because they weren't happy with it." And I'm like, "Well,
I don't think so.
okay.
Uh,
No, I don't think so either." But yeah, it's one of those things. It's like I think people made a bigger deal out of it, but I could definitely see Nintendo being like, "Well, we're not going to promote that because that's that's not family. That's
yeah,
not our normal vibe." Like,
yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't know the full story about it. I just know how I felt it at the time, and just like overhearing things from the Nintendo people at the time, and we were just kind of thrown in the same bus because we were
you had
also
that
coming
R.
from Rare, and it was assumed that we had something to do with it. I mean, sure, we playtested it for a couple of weeks. That's all, though.
Like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Well, we loved it because it was like had all these movie gags and things in it, and like stuff to
Right.
do with the Matrix and Saving Private Ryan, all kinds of stuff in there. I mean, it's funnily enough, one of my son's favorite songs is "The Great Mighty Pooh."
I'm with
It's
you.
the
Yeah.
it's the it's and I listen to it every single day, dropping him off to school. We literally pulled out a CD burner and made a CD with his favorite tracks on it, and that's one of the tracks on it.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. That's so
and it's
funny.
now on loop in the car every day, so I hear that a lot.
Now the question is it the 64 version or is it the Xbox version? Because one of them is censored more than the other.
It's actually both, which was a mistake. I couldn't remember how to burn a CD. It had been so long, so I was pulling things together, and I'd forgotten to remove the uncensored version. So one of the tracks in there is not censored, and unfortunately, it just kind of means that if I don't remember, well, if I remember, I skip that track because there's two boys in the back that shouldn't be hearing that stuff.
Oh, and
But
you know that's what they'll latch on. What is that?
yeah,
You know?
yeah, no, they've heard it plenty of times at this point. Now it's too late for that.
Yeah, that's funny because I have this big shelf just filled with different rare stuff, Banjo, Conquer, Donkey Kong, like all that, right? And my nephew, he'll come over. He's 6, and he will gravitate wherever I have it. I think it's on the top shelf. I have like a Great Mighty Pooh, like a tiny little statuette. It's sorry, it's blurring for the depth of field,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a tiny little like U2 statuette of the Great Mighty Pooh, and every time he's like, "Oh, what's that?" And his big thing is like coming over, and I pop on the N64 or the GameCube, and I'm like, "Okay, pick a game." Like, we're gonna play a game. Like, let's do it. I've recorded some of them for my channel. And he always wants to play Conquer, just because he sees the like
It
up
looks
there.
great. Yeah.
It looks
It's got the
great.
right visuals. It's
Yeah,
just it's a bit frustrating. The control scheme is a bit frustrating now, and when you actually get started on it, it's rock hard and difficult for a modern gamer that's used to a more refined experience now.
it is. It is. And the Xbox version, although it did improve some of the control, it also like artificially made it harder by adding more enemies and stuff. So I'm like,
Oh,
but aside from that, I'd be like, no, you can't play that one. Sorry. But
yeah, yeah.
every time he comes over and he asks about it, and he's like, the great, like he knows it's the Great Mighty Pooh.
Mm.
Evidently, I told him at some point, but he just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the things he remembers. It's always that, and he always latches onto it, which says something about the just the standout nature of the game as a whole. That some little kid comes in and sees that and goes, "What is that?" And now it's like this
Yeah, I mean,
forbidden, like,
it is. I mean, it's iconic. I wish I'd worked on that one more. It's just one of those things. I think pretty much the other half of the animators in the company all got to work on that one. Um, I think it was one of those things where I was maybe too valuable for my own good on the projects I was on. So I was just like, Mike's staying here. We're not letting Mike go, kind of thing.
uh,
And so I didn't get to work on all the other projects. There was a point where I was sat next to another animator, and she'd done at least a few weeks or a few months on pretty much everything in the company. And when she left in only a few years, she had tons of credits to her name. Whereas it took me 7 years to have two credits,
mm.
basically, because I was just on the projects for such a long time. But yeah, that is what it is. Also forgot I've got a Cameo mug here.
Oh, look at you!
Yeah.
I love it.
I use that for my toothbrushes now.
That's awesome. Well,
Mm.
transitioning out of that, there's still one more game that you did have a little tidbit. Viva
Awesome.
Pinata, Trouble in
Oh yeah,
Paradise.
yeah, yeah.
You did
So
animate.
yeah, I mean, I feel like I worked on basically I was just put into the team to work on a bunch of different animations for different characters that were going to be DLC.
Hmm.
Um, but I think in the end, the stuff I worked on actually ended up coming out in the next version of the game. I can't remember what it was
Yeah,
called.
Trouble in Paradise. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah, I think
yeah.
the bulk of my work probably ended up in that one. It wasn't very clear. I think maybe some of my work was in the original, but
Mm.
most of it was in that one, I think.
I know on your
Uh,
website it shows the Robin Pinata. I think it's Robin or something. Robin or
yes.
something like that. Did you work on others too, in addition to that?
Yeah, but sometimes it's just about what you can get your hands on in terms of footage when you leave a company, you know.
Sure.
So, but that was a fun one to work on, just really cool, snappy little
Yeah,
animations.
yeah.
Um,
Very cartoony and very like
mhm.
over the top. Like if there was ever a game that you could sort of animate like squishy like
Hmm? Yeah.
squishy bouncy effects, I feel like Viva Pinata is a strong one. Kirby is probably another one.
I
But
got a little bit of that, I think, in doing some of the creatures on Cameo during the
yeah,
cinematics. I was able to make them a little bit more squashy and stretchy, but only within a certain tolerance. That kind of comes down to style of games. Sometimes you
right.
just kind of look at things and you look and you go, well, that looks like it's a bit more locked down. You can't make that squash too much. But then you look at Viva Pinata and it's like, oh, that one you can go to town on.
Yeah. And speaking of style, I was looking through your catalog and I have to pull it up so I remember all the names. Um, but I saw cameo influences sort of across the board. I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, you mentioned Skylanders. I'm like, yeah, I can see it there. Um, there was the Devil's Angels and Dating.
Mm-hmm.
I see that. I see a lot of cameo in that. And there was one other, but oh yeah, yeah. I guess it is Devil's Angels and Dating. This the full
Yeah.
thing I was watching, but I look at it and I'm like, I can see so much cameo in this, and
Oh, really?
yeah, I
That
don't
was
know what it is. It's like the look. I can't exactly pinpoint it. It's something about like the facial animations. I think in particular, maybe.
maybe. I mean that I did. I worked on both of them, so yeah. Uh, They were a few years apart, though. I mean, I finished Cameo. I suppose that was 2005 when that shipped with the Xbox 360.
Yeah.
Sound about right?
Sounds about right.
And um, and then I shipped Devil's Angels and Dating. Uh, Losing track now. 2012. 2012. So there is a gap between them. But I worked on Devil's Angels and Dating for about 5.5 years, kind of part time. It was like a pet project. It was the first one of a series of things where I just basically worked with a lot of remote people.
Hmm.
Um, so I was looking to make something high production value, Pixar-esque, bringing all my skills from Cameo into something that was my project. And I was still back in the UK at the time and rustling up people trying to figure out who would be interested in working with me on it. Um, and basically just started building a bit of a following. And what the key thing that I did differently at that time was that I was public about it, rather than being all secretive and saying no one can see this yet.
Yeah.
Um, I was just like, I'm going to show everything, and I created a Facebook-like feed of stuff, and I just started putting all my stuff in it. And it was a really great way of attracting people. And there was animators from all over the world that just kind of came on board and sort of said, "Can I work on a shot? Can I do a thing? Can I make you a model? Can I do an effect?" And so on. We ended up with like 100 people that worked on this thing, just volunteering from all over the world, over the course of about 5.5 years until we shipped that film. And funnily enough, it kind of became the model for how other people were going to do short films in the future. And eventually, the model for how people would work remotely after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of stuff that we had to figure out how to do the first time around. I repeated the exercise again with another film I did, which was The Wrong Rock, which also had about 100 people working on it from all over the world. That one had a slightly different mantra. Like Devils was made to create thumbnails on YouTube people wanted to click on so it would get lots of views. It has
Hmm.
lots of views, so that thumbs up did its job. And then the Wrong Rock was created to win awards and get prestige, and it kind of did that. It got Oscar qualified,
It's
and
beautiful. I'm just
yeah,
saying that
I
it's
mean,
beautiful.
I,
Like,
I mean, that wasn't all me. Again, pulling in favors. I had some people work
sure.
on it. There was at one point I had a guy come over and work on it. A friend of mine here in town, um, who just brought that Pixar look to it.
Hmm.
And in some ways that was a bad thing because all of a sudden you have to live up to that. It was originally just going to be something that maybe I could have done on my own, but eventually it became this big project because it just was like, well, now we've got to make it look like that. You can't not. So it did sort of escalate, and these projects do tend to do have a habit of doing that. So an awful lot of my job over the years has become trying to figure out how to control the feature creep. Um, and make sure it's a shippable thing. And I learned an awful lot about that from my days at Rare because I saw how much feature creep could be a thing. It's so easy when you've got 20 people hashing away at a thing for years on end to just go, oh, I've got an idea, I've got an idea, throw that in and
Yeah.
that in and that in and that in, until eventually it's too much and no one can take it all in and you end up cutting a load of stuff and then you just think, well, that was a waste. So trying to control yourself and figure out what you should and shouldn't put into something becomes a big thing. And so, like Devil's Angels and Dating, the thing I did with that was I said, okay, none of these characters have legs. They're all ghost like at the bottom and they taper off and they just float so that I don't have to do any of the contact points or walking or any of that kind of stuff that normally takes a lot of extra time in animation.
Hmm.
Funnily enough, it actually ended up generating new challenges because you had to figure out how does this wispy smoke thing move around underneath, um,
Clouds.
and it became a new technical challenge. But at least it gave it a visual look that was unique. And then when I was doing the wrong rock, that one's all about mushrooms, and so that I sort of originally I was going to do like what's the least complex thing I can animate to tell a story. It was going to be pebbles, and it was going to be pebbles on a rock, trying to get from one rock to another. But I couldn't figure out how to make the pebble emote in any way. So
Yeah.
I was like, what's the next least complex thing I can create that can give me a little bit of emotion? And that was a mushroom that could bend
Hmm.
and lift up and lift down and make silly noises and things like that. And so it became a movie all about mushrooms.
That's awesome. I do want to see the Pebble movie though. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think it just would
It's a
have been
drama, right?
harder. It's yeah, tragic drama with a little tear falling down the corner of the people's eyes. No, but you're just trying to figure out how do you condense this thing to make it shippable? Because the trouble is, otherwise, you end up going off on these projects that go on for years. And
Right.
along the way through, I mean, I speak to so many creative people along the way, and it's a minefield of people working on personal projects that have taken very long to bring to market, and many of them don't. So I think that in the end has become one of my strengths is actually shipping something because I can see just how easy it is to go off on a tangent and not actually get it to market. I mean, I know people who've spent 15 years working on a single pet project that still hasn't ever come out.
Yep.
Um, and the problem with that is that the market changes. People's expectations about what they want to see, the tools that you're using with have changed, and like now you just wouldn't make it the same way that you start the way you started on it 15 years earlier.
Yeah.
So you have to get something out in a certain amount of time. And again, a thing I learned from being at Rare and more than anywhere on what we could and couldn't do, and maybe we did spend too long brewing up Starfox Adventures, but at the end of the day, it came out and it had some level of success at the time, and I mean Kameo had a fixed deadline. It was the Xbox 360's launch title.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but either than that, we might have launched it maybe a year earlier, but for a different platform.
Yeah, it's crazy. Even the parallels to me doing content creation. Like I talk with other creators all the time, and oftentimes the thing I see that they don't do is just post. They do a lot of talking about what they're making. They sit there, they keep grinding away, they keep making something, and in the meantime of them making something, I put out like 4 videos, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like there's definitely truth to that. Sometimes you just gotta I had a producer. I did music, and I have an album out there with my rock band. And we had a producer at the time, and he said, projects are never finished, they're only
Yeah.
abandoned.
Well, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, so true.
There is a sweet spot to hit, though. I mean, you can knock stuff out too fast, and then there isn't any value for the audience. And
Right.
there's time sometimes when you've spent too long on it, and you've missed the point of the value that you could have brought to them some time ago. So it's finding that sweet spot, what resources you want to pour into something, versus what you can get out of it. The problem is you don't always know what you can get out of it.
Right. Right. You got to
Mhm.
figure that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Which,
So I mean, we obviously all of this sort of leads into the game that I've been working on,
exactly.
which has basically become the third leg of that giant projects that I work on. Um, there are a bunch of other smaller projects along the way that I worked on. I mean, my wife and I developed some screenplays for feature films that we'd love to make someday. And there was a series that I'm fond of, which is a comedy series as well. But ultimately, there was the Pheonix Gene was something that I started thinking about when I first came to LA. I just I put on my headphones, went out and sat on a hill in a field one day, and I was just like, right, I've done all this other stuff. I've done the Devil's Angels and Dating. What am I going to do next? And I started dreaming up this idea, um, and ultimately evolved into a phoenix, and a phoenix that could die and rebirth in different times and places, um, and had certain abilities towards it. And that evolved into short films. I pitched it to a studio I was working for at one point. So I actually went back to my friend Nick Southam, who'd done concept art for Star Fox and Kameo, and had him help me put together a pitch deck to pitch out the movie idea for this um, feature film that we wanted to make. Um, and but that didn't happen at the time, and we just had all this material. It was really rich material. Funnily enough, along the way, when I decided I wanted to make something, I didn't make the Pheonix Gene at first. I made the wrong rock because it was simpler. I was looking for something simpler, smaller, because the Pheonix Gene was a big project that was just
Sure.
like, this is going to go on way too long. I will not finish this or ship it. So I made the wrong rock first because it was, in theory, easier. uh, Although, funnily enough, it was 2 years making the wrong rock, but that was short in comparison to the 5.5 years I spent working on Devil's Angels and dating. But then, pandemic happened. We picked up a Quest 2 and we wanted to make a game, and it just felt like the perfect fit for the Pheonix Gene, which we'd been developing as a story. And so at that point, my wife was becoming more of a writer and developing all kinds of different stuff. And so it was just like, okay, you can run with the story elements, and I'm going to start teaching myself Unreal in order to try and figure out how to make this game. And now, obviously, I'd worked in games multiple times at that point, but
Hmm.
I'd never actually made my own game. Uh, I had done some games design work at Rare, where I got to put together some pitch documents and pitch them to Lee and a few other people, which was a really exciting time. And I have nothing to show for that. No one's going to see that stuff. But there was some early versions of, let's say, what became the Kinect that I was developing stuff for. Um, and that experience in games design had sort of piqued my interest and was like, I want to recapture that and follow through on that. And so I started developing my own game. Um, and at some point, I had to bring on someone who knew what they were doing. Um, I was teaching myself Unreal, but there was only so much I could do. I wasn't a programmer.
Right.
I hired somebody at the time to come on board who helped me build the prototype, and we spent about, I want to say it was about 3 months putting together the prototype. That was getting expensive, so we paused that for a bit, and I was trying to see what else I could achieve on my own. We did eventually bring on somebody else who then was with the project for at least 2 years, I want to say. Um, and as it grew and grew and grew, and I actually did some vendor work for a few other games along the way. I art directed another game that hasn't been released yet. Um,
Cool.
and that allowed us to bring in the money that we needed and the expertise to help build up the art crew for the Pheonix Gene. And so we had a good art crew. I brought over some of the artists that had worked on my previous two short films as well. So it became a big blend of like all these people who'd worked with me at different places. I even managed to bring Phil Woods over from who I'd worked alongside with, who was best friends with for quite a while there back in my Rare days. But we hadn't seen each other for quite a while, and he helped out on the Pheonix Gene, but part time because basically anybody who has that level of experience and has been in the industry that long, they're all busy and they can get
Hmm.
work. So it's really hard to get them to work on your project full time, but they can be there at those key moments and do solve those specific problems that really help the project move along. I don't think there's any way we would have shipped the Pheonix Gene as optimized, running at such a good frame rate, if we hadn't brought Phil on board to help with that kind of stuff. But along the way, I also brought back Grant Kirkhope, who did the music for The Wrong Rock and for the Pheonix Gene.
Oh, that's
Um,
neat. I didn't know that
he
he did it for the Wrong Rock too. That's
he
cool.
did, yes, that's right. That was a weird story too. I'll give you that one. So I was at one of my movie Christmas party things, and somebody there was like going, "You know Grant Kirkhope, right?" And I sort of knew him. I mean, I'd heard of him. I didn't really know him that well or anything, but I did have him as a Facebook friend because all the Rare people had connected on Facebook years ago. And so this guy said, I have a composer friend who really wants to talk to Grant Kirkhope. Would you be able to hook him up? And I was like, wow, I don't even know enough about Grant to reach out like that, but okay, I'll do it for this stranger. And so I did. I wrote to Grant on Facebook to say, there's this guy who really wants to talk to you and he's a big fan. And then Grant said, oh, I'm a big fan of yours. I saw Devils. I loved everything you were doing on that.
How cool.
And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And then he was like, and then I realized I found out multiple things all at the same time. Grant had moved to Hollywood, which is where I was as well. And we were only living 40 minutes away from each other without realizing it. He wanted to do more stuff in film, And he had this big respect for the work that I'd done on Devils, Angels, and Dating, and so he said that he'd love to work on The Wrong Rock, and we got together, hit it off, got to know each other a bit more, and yeah, he scored the whole Wrong Rock for us, which turned out to be a really good collaboration. Not only because he scored the whole thing, but also I brought in some connections I'd made down in Austin, Texas, whilst making Devil's Angels and Dating. I was trying to get a band involved because we were going to make it a musical once upon a time. That didn't happen, but the people that I got to know um, later formed a different band called The Misses, and I reached out to them and said, "Would you like to do some music for The Wrong Rock?" And they said yes, and they went off and did this amazing track that is now the end of The Wrong Rock. And then Grant took some of their themes and weaved them into the score that he was doing. So it's really a great payoff, because what happens is you watch the film, you hear all these themes, and then when you get to the credits, it's like following through on that
Yeah.
theme. And it's really effective because everyone's like, "Oh my god, that song's so good!" And it's like, yeah, you know why you like that song so much? Because you remember the themes from 5 minutes earlier.
Yep. Yep. It's a journey, but it's all the same
Mhm.
song. I love it.
In some ways, yeah. I mean, obviously, the Grant brought all his own stuff
Right.
to it as well. One of the reasons I like working with Grant is that he leans into the themes. There's a lot of composers that are just kind of making sounds and noises and stuff, but there's nothing memorable about what they're doing. But I've always said from day one, is like, I'm a Star Wars fan. I want to be making um, those leitmotifs that we can weave through the music and make them into memorable things for certain key moments and certain key characters in the story. But anyway, that relationship worked really well, and he just basically said, "Whatever you're doing next, I'm in." So he was really the very first person signed up to work on the Pheonix Gene. So yeah, at that point we've clocked in. Let's see, we got Nick Southam from Rare, we got Phil Woods from Rare, and Grant Kirkhope from Rare, um, and then myself. I guess so.
Hmm.
That's the four people from Rare that ultimately worked on the Pheonix Gene.
That's super
But yeah,
cool.
it was a big journey, huge project. We shipped it during the summer. It's an amazing experience, I think, and now we're just trying to let the world know about it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Tell me your experience. You said you just finished it last night.
I finished it last night. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. And let me tell you, my favorite level was actually it was level 3 because it's the first level like so you're really fixed on the narrative, especially for the first like 2 levels and you're going through it's very like straightforward focused and level 3 is where things just start to get like trippy, I would say, where like you're flying in and I believe it's the people jumping off the building and it's like save those people. You're like okay, and then you're like dive bombing super fast and you're just like quickly reacting to things, but then at different points you're like kind of turning around and like looking and like really interactive sort of like exploring the world, which I really appreciated, and that
Mhm.
doesn't get lost after that. It keeps happening and I love it, and it just gets even more trippy as you're slipping through the the
Mhm.
stream and everything and looking around. And man, it was awesome. It's an experience. It's almost like a cinematic you're watching, but then you're like, oh yeah, I'm playing this. Like I gotta fire, or otherwise I'm gonna die.
Right. Yeah, and actually, there a lot of the testers said level 3 was their favorite as well. Yeah, so I mean, for anyone who's not quite getting it, basically we have characters that are taking a the life rate drug in order to allow themselves to rebirth after death, and so they feel like they can jump off of buildings because and just have fun, go
Yep,
woohoo, because when they
we'll be
hit
all
the
right.
bottom and they die, they're going to rebirth. But the mission for the player is that they're given is to try and save them and drop them into these portals on the way down. So yeah, you've got this moment where always had this vision of like, can we just fly down, chasing people, trying to capture them whilst they're falling down? Wouldn't that be absolutely amazing? Yes, but it's difficult. Like if you put a VR headset on and you're looking down, all the weight is on the front of your face, and it starts to drain, sort of be tiring on the back of your neck. So you can't spend much time looking down. It's not very pleasant. So what I actually did was I tilted the world to an angle so you get a slight sense that you're going down, but you're not really going down so much as it's painful to hurt on, it's hurting on the headset. So that first section, you go over the edge, you go straight down just long enough to feel that
Yeah,
moment, and
exactly.
and then it puts you into a slipstream where it disorientates you just enough to maybe not notice that you come out at a 45-degree angle. And then so you're kind of getting the sense that you're going down, but without it being as uncomfortable. And then we basically just do it over a series of stretches because I also timed it out and figured out that you can't, you still don't want to be looking down for too long.
Hmm.
So we were like, okay, you can do it for this amount of time before you need to take a break. So each one of those little slipstreams in between those levels was designed to give your neck a bit of a chance to move around and take a break. And then you could do another stretch. But usually, what would happen is the next stretch would be a little bit shorter, a little bit faster, but at a tighter, more steeper angle. So that was like a big experiment, and it paid off because it was one of everyone's favorite sections.
I never felt like my neck got tired at all. So nailed it. Like,
Yeah,
great.
I mean, a similar one. Another similar problem we had the next level after that takes place in this cylindrical building. Um,
Yep.
the whole it's like the life right headquarters is basically a giant cylinder with a hole down the middle and fans at the bottom, and that's all by design. There's a boss encounter at the bottom where there's a fan, and it was supposed to be that you rose up through the middle and there was going to be some gameplay that ended up having to be cut and pared down because of performance problems. But while you're going down this cylinder, one of the bigger problems there was that if you were to keep doing that, you'd get dizzy. So
I could
what
see
we had to do was like I figured out that you could do about 1.5 to 2 rotations before you have to go the other way. So what I just found excuses to basically go a rotation and then turn around and go the other way, and then do that a couple of times, then turn around and go the other way, and just to kind of break it up so that the player
that.
never gets dizzy. So, I mean, I don't. Admittedly, now I've played it so many times, I'm not affected by any of
Right.
the problems associated with this stuff. So I hope you didn't get dizzy, but in theory, I'd worked it out so you wouldn't have.
No, I didn't get dizzy at all. My neck didn't hurt. I
Mhm.
mean, I got physically tired from
Yes.
because it even tells you it's like don't be afraid to move. Like dodge and weave, move to the left and right. And I'm like, all right, so I did that and then I would, anything to save the character, like I would just sacrifice my body like fine. So I'd be like holding out my arm like way out here for like extended periods of time. I'm like, oh wait, let me switch arms, which is appreciated that I can switch
Yes.
arms. But I'm mad at myself because I realized way late in the game that so you shoot with the trigger and you sit there and
Yeah.
shoot. What I didn't realize because I'm probably just dumb, you can shoot with both at the same
Yeah.
time. And once I discovered that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have made things so much. So I'm like,
Yeah.
like aiming different.
Yeah. Because you could just sit there going and
Yeah,
get twice as many fireballs out.
exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh. Because I sat there. I mean, to be fair, you stack it with power ups. So I got the power up
Mhm.
of like it's a triple shot or a five, whatever you
It's a
call it.
quad fireball.
Yeah. And so I got that quite a bit. But once I discovered that I could do it, I think it might have been in the Beatrice fight that I discovered
Mhm.
that I could do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, because I already died like 4 or 5
Yes.
times, and then I'm like, whoa! And then the second I got it, I was like, done, like locked in, got it. I don't think we really described what the gameplay is straightforward,
Yeah.
but it's sort of like a Star Fox was a pretty good actually comparison, but
It
it's
is.
a rail
Basically,
shooter.
basically, I was playing VR games and thinking there isn't anything like Star Fox in VR, and I wanted to experience that basically. Um, but on top of that, I felt like you had to take it further. Like Star Fox was very linear; you just went in a
Hmm.
straight line. So we wanted to be able to go in all directions, so the path can take you in any direction. So I do tend to recommend people play it either with a swivel chair, so you can spin around, or be standing up to play. You can play quite it. You can play the whole game with a swivel chair if you want to, and that makes you last longer. If you stand, it's a bit more
Yeah,
tiring,
I
and
stood.
therefore you ultimately, yeah, you can totally do it. I mean, what I tend to do is I start a level seated, and then once things get a bit too intense, I just push the chair out of the way and I start standing from that point forwards. But if you play the whole game standing up, yes, it's tiring. You need to sort of take breaks between levels. And to be honest, I think most people um, would probably appreciate that, maybe it's only two levels at a time you play, and then you take a
Hmm.
break. That would be my best guess. I
That sounds
think
about
maybe
right. Yeah.
I think maybe we made some of the later levels a bit too long, because like the last level is about 35 minutes long or something like that. So you can't do two levels including that one for sure.
Yeah, the last level in particular I did notice was really long. It felt like it was going to end at certain points and then it kept going. I was like, "Oh, there's more." But I definitely
Okay.
like I was feeling it in my arms at that point. I was like,
Oh yeah.
"Oh man, I got to tough it out. I got to push through." And I did, and I'm glad I
Uh,
did. But yeah, it was.
I it's I wish I'd seen more players playing it fresh, in some ways. I mean, in this world where everyone's working remotely, I got to hear the tester feedback, but really it was just their reports after the fact. They didn't tell me all the little things. And I think at that point I'd worked out and my muscles were good at holding controllers
Yeah.
out for long periods of times because I'm playing it all the way through every single week. So it was hard to know what was and wasn't a good level of, balance on something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
But
how could everybody's different? That's something. It's like it's almost physical ability versus an actual like the neck thing makes a lot more sense as like a general player. But obviously, if you get somebody that does moderate exercise, they're probably not going to get that. Like I did the whole thing standing up. I didn't feel tired like my legs. It was really my arms because you're just constantly like, and maybe that's just
yes,
how I play. But it does prompt you in the beginning. You can grab the phoenix is flying and you can grab it and kind of move it. I think it says like a paper airplane, which was a very
yeah.
very good way to describe it. And I'm like, yeah,
We were always trying to find that equivalent to try and explain that, make it feel like a kid playing with a paper aeroplane or something. But I noticed one person that was testing it got the wrong idea. They assumed that saying that meant you could throw it like a paper airplane. And
mm,
so the whole first level, he was saying, I don't understand why I can't throw it. And it's like, well, it wasn't designed to be thrown yet. Admittedly, we did build that mechanic in, and it's kind of an extra I can tell you about. So basically, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you here, I'll try and stay on camera. Here we go. Okay, so if you push up the joystick to make the character go further out
hmm,
and put your arm back, the phoenix will be all the way down there, way away, right? So then swing like that and let go, and the phoenix will fly off into space and then come back to you like a boomerang.
that's a little secret hot tip there. I like that. I did not know
Yeah.
that. It's funny though. I did try that when I heard the paper airplane. I did try. I was like
Mhm.
throwing it, but I
Yeah,
mean,
well,
I did it once or twice, and I was like, oh no 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 wait, it's just telling me to hold it like a paper airplane.
yeah, it is. I mean, early in the game, you haven't got the upgrades yet to
Right.
really make it work. Funnily enough, it does work, but it's going to go in. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not going to actually get very far. But once you get upgraded later and the distance you can make the character move away, then it kicks in um, some of the physics features in Unreal that allow us to make this thing shoot off. And it was only a very late discovery. I would argue it's a bit of a shame that it was such a late discovery because I would have built more game mechanics around it had I realized how cool it was. We made a video at one point showcasing it to explain that it was there, but we hadn't really done an awful lot in the game to explore it. I mean, you could probably get a few extra power ups and things like that that you might not have been able to get, but there was not like a whole level built around it, which is
Yeah.
probably what we should have done next. Because a lot of the upgrades you get along the way were to you would have a whole level based on like, oh, this is the level where you're going to learn about this feature, kind of like Mario. So basically, you could argue that my days back at Rare influenced how I do games design because I was like, okay, well, I want to give them one game mechanic, do a whole level to learn that game mechanic, and then another game mechanic, and do a whole level to learn that game mechanic, and so on. That's what we tried to do.
Yep.
Um,
And then it just gets
whether we
absolutely
completely
crazy.
pulled it off, yeah, whether we pulled it off entirely was is down to resources and running out of time. But that's what we tried to do. And I think for our limited resources, we were very pleased with what we managed to make, and we got some good reviews on the Meta Store. Came out in the summer, and then we've got it out on Steam as well, just at the beginning of the month. And we're waiting for more people to review it over there. So
Yeah.
send your minions over.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know a couple in the VR space that probably would love to play it, so I'll definitely recommend it. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun
Oh,
playing
great.
through it, and yeah, I like the mechanic of switching the probabilities. I thought was really unique too,
So
going
that
from
was
red to blue.
from Ikaruga.
Okay.
If I don't know if you've ever played that one, but that was one of the few games from back in the day that I played multiple times through, and it was quite cinematic for a scrolling shooter. But it used black and white to do toggling, and you basically made your ship toggle black and white. And if bullets coming towards you were one color, they could hurt you, and if you switched, you would absorb them and charge up. So we
Yeah,
were taking the same mechanic in the Pheonix Gene, basically.
I really like that. I think it adds a lot of depth to just the times where you're just going and it's almost like just enemies scattered here and there. It almost keeps you alert and like looking around because you're like, what color's coming at me? And then
Yes.
switch. And even in addition to that, just the fact that some objects would show up or disappear depending on what color you switch to, so red or blue. And I'm always hunting for those secrets, man. So I'm like,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You can hide things inside of solid objects when you can toggle reality and suddenly make that solid object not solid anymore. So there was a lot of little tricks. There's a lot of stuff hidden around in there, but it's a tricky one because it is a rails shooter ultimately, and the game keeps moving whether you've noticed it or not.
yep,
Um, Say if something like that happened in Mario, you'd be like, "Oh, I saw that thing." You can go back, generally speaking, and get it. But on the Phoenix Gene, it can be a little bit frustrating sometimes because you'll go, "Oh, I saw that thing, and I can't get to it now unless you
yep,
throw your character at it."
yes.
And sometimes I've tried. It's not easy though because it gets a bit sloppy. But I've tried. Sometimes I'm like, "Oh, I definitely want that." Throw it over there. But then you don't know how many things you may hit along the way. So that's a real skill. That one.
Yeah, I got to figure
Um,
that out because there were definitely times, especially saving the little mutants that were sitting there,
mhm.
like they'd pop up and I'd be like last minute notice and I'd be like, oh, and I'd turn and I'd flick the joystick up to try and get it to go out as far as possible, and I'd be just there, just like if I had just a little more oomph, I would have been able to get
Yeah,
it, but I'd be like, ah,
those things are quite generous, though. I think you can. The hit sphere on those things is quite generous, so you can get within a good range and still pick them up. Um, but yeah, yeah. What was I going to say? Oh, I forgot now. No, never mind.
sequel question mark.
So we would love to make more of this game. I think at the end, at its core, though, this is my wife and I making a game, and we put up a lot of money to make this thing, and a lot of time, and so we have to see how it does first.
Hmm.
There, we spent some time putting extra features into it after launch. There was a few things that we'd wanted to do, a few things that the testers had said that they would like, and a lot of it was just like seeing what were the priorities, so we addressed some of the priorities first, and then we started building things out until we've eventually got down to the little stuff that's nice to have but no one really cares about. So we've done a bunch of updates, probably about roughly one a month since we launched it. We're down to now the point where we've got like Chinese support in there and all that kind of stuff. I, I mean, when I'm doing what I'm doing, I feel like a child most of the time, but you start to feel a bit like an adult when you're putting Chinese into your game and you're having to translate everything. And this is when I really feel like I'm adulting.
That's it.
Um, so yeah, we got all those sorts of features in. We even put out the soundtrack, Grant soundtrack that's now available in the bundle on Steam, and we've got the ebook as well. Funnily enough, my wife is still kind of working on it. So if you buy it now, there's the version that you would be reading is an earlier version. It is complete, but she's continuing to polish it right now. The first
Mm.
book, which the game is kind of based on. It's funny though. So the book is more about the Jackie character, with Firestorm the Phoenix coming into the story on and off. But I knew that the game was going to have to be more about Firestorm character because you needed to be flying all the time. So it's more like a parallel story where we spend more time with Firestorm and less time with Jackie. But as you know, we later in the game you get to evolve Jackie, and she becomes a flying character too. So it's a mix of all kinds of things. But when we started making the game, we were like, how do we make Firestorm's parallel story, to keep things interesting for him, when we know we cannot deliver everything that's in the book, because there's a lot of stuff in the book that doesn't fit with the game. There's no point in trying to cram the entire book into the
Right,
game.
right.
But you are trying to figure out what are the strengths of the book that we can bring to the game, um, that fit with the main character you want to control, and simultaneously delivering anything interesting that could be happening along the way. So
I think
yeah,
you did a
that's
great
it.
job.
We've now got a complete bundle out with the book and the soundtrack and the game on Steam, and then we've got the what I would love to do as well is I want to get the PC version of the game functioning on the Meta Store, so that people who have bought the Meta version of the game for the Quest, but also have a PC, could play the PC version of it as part of the package. So I'm just trying to get approval from Meta for that. So if anyone at Meta's watching right now, please approve us.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I love that. Sometimes even going like I mean now with AirLink, it's pretty accessible to play wirelessly tethered to your PC. But even back in the day when I was using my Quest 2 and I had to hardwire in, I liked playing games and having multiple versions to see like the visual differences. And I'll be like, is it worth having the cable in the back? Or do I want to just like play this wireless? Oftentimes I want wireless, but now it's like less of an issue, but it'd be super cool to be able to play that PC version and maybe get slightly higher frames or higher visual fidelity. Like I'm all for it.
Yeah, the big changes for us. I mean, we haven't got the production value to be able to like make it significantly better on PC, but the frame rate counts for a lot with a kind of
Mm-hmm.
game like this. So the Quest 2 does 72 frames per second quite comfortably. It could have gone further, but one of those funny things I found was that when the frame rate varies too much because of different things going on, it's very uncomfortable when the frame rate changes. However, you can cap the frame rate at a lower but acceptable number, and it will stay constantly at that number, and that's more comfortable. So the Quest 2 is capped at 72, the Quest 3 is capped at 90 frames per second, and the PC version, you can manually set the cap in the settings. I tend to say, oh, you could play the game at 120 frames per second because that's what the Quest can do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got a headset that can do more than that, you can go even higher in theory. I don't happen to have one, but I know there are headsets out there that do like 140 frames per second. So we've got a 140 frame per second setting in there. There's a one for 160 too, but I don't know what headset does 160 frames a second.
I don't either. You got me. I got a Quest 3. I like it though.
Mhm.
It's great.
Yeah.
And the visual
Mm,
fidelity, the lenses were the big thing. Going from a Quest 2 to a Quest 3, huge upgrade.
mm. Yes, yes, I do love it too. I've still got my two over here. It's what they call a Franken Quest. Um, there
Oh wow,
wasn't
that's
um,
serious.
there wasn't an appropriate head strap for it at the time that I got the headset, so I got an old Vive strap, and then I have a 3D printed adapter, and then I've just got this sort of Velcro-y device that attaches a battery on the back for a bit of extra battery life, and it's super comfortable because I've also got like extra custom inserts on the inside here and prescription lenses on the thing. This is a way nicer version of it
Yeah.
in a sense, but it's all off the shelf. It was easy to do that by that point. Um,
Yeah, that's
but they're
funny.
both.
I do remember having my Quest 2 and thinking the main flaw, there were two main flaws with the Quest 2, and they weren't really flaws just so much as like, oh man, if the next iteration is going to fix these and it's going to be better. And that was the battery life and the lenses, the like Fresnel lenses that were like the sort of swirly effect. And you had to just I spent a lot of time just constantly like readjusting. But I remember I had a battery, like a portable battery that I did not have a proper like mount for. And I just like taped it on the back of the,
Yes,
like
yeah.
wrapped the crap
So
out of it.
my top tip for a lot of people who haven't been bothered to buy a new strap yet is stick your headset, this front part, on a scale, and then put an equal amount of coins to make up that weight. Okay, roll that bunch of coins in tinfoil, and then Velcro that to the back of your strap, and you'll have a perfectly balanced head strap. So I used that for a while until I got myself a proper strap.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite effective because you have a perfectly balanced head strap. But you know what ultimate accessory you are currently missing, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Is that haptic
So
feedback?
that's right. Yeah. Um, I secretly was rather hoping while I was making the Pheonix Gene that we were going to find some way of getting haptics into the game, and I was just like, I'm dying to have one of these things. It also come had little these strap things as well for the arms, and then there's a special thing here on the
Oh
headset
wow.
that gives you feedback in the visor as well. And I was super lucky. They saw the game and they said, "Hey, would you like to put haptic support into your game? We'll send you one." I'm like, "Yes."
Yes. That's so cool.
Yeah, so we worked with them. They were great. They tested the game after the fact too. Even kind of collaborated with us because they use like a an online portal for creating all the haptic events and things. So we would trigger the events and we could use their online portal to do stuff, and they would play test it and go, "Oh, you know what? You could tweak it a little bit this way. We can give you a custom haptic for that, and here it is," and all this kind of stuff. So they were great to work with. So yeah, it's like the ultimate experience.
Wow. I can imagine
I
how
will.
that would really enhance it because, like, sometimes you'll be hit by an enemy and you don't quite know where it came from. But if you had that sort
Mhm.
of feedback, you'd be like, oh, top right.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got. I'm trying to think of all the main things. I mean, a lot of it is just you get like little rumbles on certain parts of you when you're absorbing energy and building up your shields and stuff like that.
That's so
There's the
cool.
hits that you get. Also, you've got, but it's tricky because like we're putting haptics into these things for when you do something on the right hand versus when you do something on the left hand. But then you might also be wearing these things, and these are way stronger.
Mm.
So it ended up being this careful balance of what do we apply here versus what do we apply here, because we don't know what the end user might actually have. Um, but so we've got like sequences and cinematics where there's versions of effects for both, and we're not really quite sure what everyone's got. But it's super cool when you've got it all. The only thing is, I feel like it there is a bit of extra weight, and it tires you out just that little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say when you play with the haptic vest, you're probably going to do 20% less, but with the energy you've got, because it's a more intense experience, but you're just not going to make it as far because you're
Yeah,
carrying the
you
extra weight.
can't. I mean, if I get tired, but you know what? On the flip side of that, getting the exercise, that's good for you, right? Push through
Yes,
it,
and
power through.
that's where it all started. Honestly, I was playing a game called Blast On in my early days of VR exploring, and I loved that game. And it would get all sweaty, and I'm like moving around the room and everything, and I was just like, this is the kind of game that I'm the most enthusiastic about now. I had kind of lost my interest in games a decade or so ago, when I felt everything was getting kind of samey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I went off and started doing more work in film and TV, and I wanted to focus more on stories. But it was coming into VR that really brought me back to games and made me realize, oh, you know what? This is the next evolution in entertainment. Like I'm present in the space. I can look around at things. I feel like I'm next to them because I can see them in stereoscopic vision with both my eyes. I'm now able to feel it, and I'm moving around in the space. And one of the beauties of moving around in the space is that you get your heart rate up, and you're more likely to come out of an experience going yeah and tell your friends about it when your heart rate is up. So I was like, that's the kind of experience I want to make, and so that's what we did.
That's what you did. The next
Yeah.
evolution of gaming, the Pheonix Gene.
Yeah, yeah. And if we can make a sequel, we would love that. But in the meantime, buy the current game,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
we'll keep
Buy the
adding to
current
it as
game
much as we
first.
possibly. Yeah, yeah. I have a games designer we're working with right now who already started working on an extra level. So if he can figure out how to get it into the game, he will. So we would like to add content, but to some degree, that there are resources involved in everything
Right.
that we do, and
Right.
so yeah, we've just got to. I'm in selling mode right now. I'm trying to get copies of the game out, so I'm going to be making videos on to help tell people about the game and spread the word.
So the difficulty setting, easy, medium, hard. I did not plan hard. I didn't venture into that. But is there
That
a
might be my
different?
coolest way to play it now. Well,
Yeah.
after because I played it every week at least for years,
Yeah.
and so I kind of let this new games designer I was working with, Philippe, and he I had to focus on other things like getting it onto the store and things like
Hmm.
that. And so I assigned him the task of making the easy and medium and hard version of the game. Basically, medium was the first version we launched with, and then he went and made the easy version and the hard version and the variations of it. And then the first time I played it with the haptic vest in hard mode, I was just like, yeah, this is like
Oh
the
man.
ultimate way to play.
You crazy.
Yeah. I
um.
tell you what, I haven't done that though. Is that there are scale settings in the game designed to make the game space bigger or smaller. And I don't know if you played with that much, but the idea is
Ooh.
basically there's four scales in there. Um, it defaults to scale three, which is around about this size of a room. Okay, which I can see you have roughly the same amount of space there.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got that much room, you can reduce the size down to like one or two, and then all of a sudden you can just kind of move around this space. One of the reasons I did that was I gave it to an old friend of mine, and he had no idea he was supposed to be standing up or turning around in the space or anything. He was literally playing on the edge of a bed. He couldn't move at all, and he couldn't understand why the game was asking him to turn around and move
Yeah.
around and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, I've got to figure that out. So we've got snap turn in there, and we've got a smaller world scale to work with. But there's also scale four, which is a bigger space, and even I haven't attempted to play that all the way through. That one's a that might give me a heart attack.
Oh man. Now I gotta go back and try that. That sounds awesome. I gotta
But you
experience
need a
it.
big space for that. Like I've had to go into a
I'll go
different
outside.
room. Uh,
Look
yeah,
stupid.
you've got to go. I think basically you might have to take two steps in each direction to get all the way across the playing area, and if you're doing that repeatedly for longer periods of time, it'll tire you out. That'll be a workout.
Mm. Yeah, if I said one thing that I wish this had more of was that high speed, like falling feeling. I loved when you pick up speed and all of a sudden you're like going through the slipstream and you're like flying around super fast. And I'd be like, I almost want high speed mode. Like
Interesting,
that would be
interesting.
awesome.
There was a game mechanic we were toying with where it would accelerate over time. Um, and like if you don't take a hit, it just keeps accelerating to see how fast you can get going before
Yeah,
you finally take a hit. I've been thinking about whether to do like a bonus level or something along those lines. But to be honest with you, though, there's so many different opinions on what works and what doesn't. There are some people that was just like it's too fast, and then there are some people that it's too slow. And so the game does ramp up. We spend early
definitely.
sections of the game trying. We mostly go in a straight line at the beginning of the game, and then the second level, there's only two major turns, so that you don't get too turned around. And then by the end of the game, you're like all over the place.
Yeah,
So
fight the
yeah,
Leviathan thing. Like,
yes.
whoa, where's it coming from?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I wanted to get. I wanted to get to that point. I had it in my head. It's like there's this Leviathan and it's going to be wrapping around you and it's going to be like on all sides of you at one point and you'll be looking for the head, trying to figure out where's that
Yeah.
weak spot going, you know, while simultaneously picking off these red blue drones along its body. So yeah, I was very pleased with how that turned out. And we got to a really good place with it, but there's more potential there. I absolutely could see us making a sequel. We just got to, you know, cover our costs first.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think you'll get there. I think it's really cool. Hopefully, this
Hmm.
video helps with that.
Well,
Super cool. I'll
yeah,
link
thank you.
everything in the description, obviously, and tell people to
Yeah.
go buy it up. But this has been really cool. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Looking forward to seeing it. Thanks.
Thank you for watching the video. I hope you'll drop a like to help spread my content, hit subscribe so you don't miss a future upload, and check out my other videos while you're at it. And as always, until next time, have a good one.